Mr. President, the choice of the theme of the 77th session cannot be more appropriate and timely. A cloud of uncertainty and fear continues to cast over humanity in light of the 2-year-long COVID-19 pandemic. Communities, families, and businesses are still reeling from the effects of the pandemic. Compounding these devastations are the persisting challenges of climate change that manifested in coastal erosion, reducing available land space, and droughts that affected the livelihood of many persons. The Ukraine war has added to the despair and uncertainty through the unnecessary loss of lives, scarcity of food grains, increase in food and fuel prices, interest rates, and many more. The consequences of COVID-19, climate change, and the war in Ukraine are clear examples of interlocking challenges that must be addressed urgently using the 77th session's motto of solidarity, sustainability, and science. Solidarity underscores the sustainability of science and its advances. We saw this through the record-breaking production of vaccines, which have saved millions of lives. By emulating the success of sharing vaccine production, of sharing science discoveries, we can ensure many more receive life-saving vaccines and medicines. On this note, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those who have assisted the people of Kiribati in many ways through vaccines, financial support, and others during the COVID-19 pandemic. Climate change is another area in which science has and continues to make advances in the science of understanding the root causes and ways to address climate change. However, the lack of solidarity, even through multilateralism, continues to be the stumbling block to address the global change emergency. The targets that have been agreed and set under the Paris Agreement, including the financial pledges, continue to remain out of reach. Mr. President, these challenges and the many others have caused much human suffering in the past 7 decades. All but have one thing in common. They are curated by the people in positions of power and influence. Much of this irresponsible, selfish, and heartless behavior are part of what the late Queen Elizabeth II referred to as the darker side of human nature. The darker side harbors negative mindsets and attitudes that give in to greed, hate, and the many other vices that breed more bad than good, resulting in conflict, violences across societies and the world at large. Broken homes cannot be fixed by wonderful speeches, meetings, resolutions, nor international instruments, but an interplay of greater compassion and solidarity. Sadly, Mr. President, harmful mindset persists, and we ourselves, being a remote country, are far from being immune from such. The escalating geostrategic competition in our part of the world means that regionalism and solidarity are at risk of being increasingly used to serve specific national interests rather than a collective of diverse needs and views working in unison for our common benefits. As is the case now, any differing views and sovereign decisions that deviates is at the risk of being vigorously scrutinized and labeled a foe through a security lens rather than a genuine desire to pursue sustainable development for the country and its people. Likewise, efforts undertaken by Kiribati to prepare for its graduation from the least developed country status, as recommended by the UN, are scrutinized. With limited resources, we are committed to drive our developmental agenda and ensure sustainability when we graduate by maximizing the benefits from the Phoenix Islands protected area and many others. Our developmental agenda are grounded on our culture, traditional values and norms, practices and aspirations for the benefit of our people. Yet, they continue to be oppressed by neocolonial thinking that does not take into account our needs, our priorities, and our national interests. This is a system of global thinking that remains steeped with legacies of environmental destruction, which our people have now inherited, as is the case of the mining of Panaba Island. We must work together to ensure that the solution and actions to correct these legacies and local watershed moments work hand in hand with actions and solutions for today's interlocking challenges. Wendell Berry pointed out that global thinking is often merely a euphemism for abstract anxieties or passions that are useless for engaged efforts to save actual landscapes. Multilateralism should never be viewed as a one-size-fits-all scenario. We are reminded that it is best to reorient our work through locally grounded planning and action that focuses on the actual scaled-down watersheds commonly addressed. Mr. President, we have a duty as leaders entrusted with the power to decide, and as enablers of solutions for the security, peace, and well-being of our people that is sustained through education, awareness, and financing. Acting together side by side in unison and solidarity, making decisions and taking actions based on reality and fact derived from natural law and true science is a precursor for the transformative solutions we need. Let us all agree to make the 77th session a watershed moment, a moment for renewed positive mindset, a moment for true discipleship action, and a moment for a prosperous, peaceful, and secure world for all. I believe that together in unison and solidarity as one human family, and with God's blessing, we can do it, and certainly we can do it. I conclude by sharing our traditional blessings of the Maori, the Rai, or the Tapemore. I thank you all.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President, Head of the Government, and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Immigration of the Republic of Kiribati for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly now will hear an address by His Excellency Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, President of the Republic of Zimbabwe. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Emmerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Your Excellency, Mr. Karosi, President of the 77th session of the General Assembly, Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Majesty, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, distinguished guests, it is my singular honor to deliver this statement to this august Assembly. Allow me to congratulate you, Mr. President, on your election as the President of the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Please be assured of Zimbabwe's full support as you guide our deliberations during this current session. I also pay special tribute to your predecessor, Mr. Abdullah Shahid, for leading the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly as the world grappled with a plethora of challenges. We commend him for the President of the General Assembly's Fellowship of Hope initiative towards enhancing youth interest, engagement, and commitment in the work of the United Nations. This will go a long way towards safeguarding the interests of future generations as embodied in today's youth. Their voices must be heard across our governments and within the United Nations. Zimbabwe is privileged to be among the pioneering beneficiaries of this program. Mr. President, delivering the 2030 agenda remains an urgent priority for us all. Our theme for this session in the court, a watershed moment, transformative solution to interlocking challenges, end of quote, captures the importance of scaling up our actions informed by the state of our world. The number of persons exposed to food insecurity continues to increase. Meanwhile, the scourges of conflict and climate change have become major drivers of migration and refugees. The ever-looming threat associated with the CCC crisis of COVID-19, conflict, and climate change has placed upon us an enormous responsibility to confront these interlocking challenges by strengthening multilateralism and solidarity. Terrorism, biodiversity, loss, desertification, pollution, and cybercrime, among other challenges, reinforce the urgent need to implement the inclusive and transformative solutions that leave no one and no place behind. This 77th session comes in the wake of debilitating impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic that overstretched our healthcare systems and severely exposed the disparities between developed and developing countries with regards to vaccine access. Africa is among the most affected. The lessons from the pandemic should inspire and enable the United Nations General Assembly to urgently scale up means to build multi-pronged capacities that must guide our collective response to future pandemics and other global challenges. Despite the illegal economic sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe successfully implemented its COVID-19 national response strategy, encouraged largely by our own internal resources and institutional capacities. The proactive approach by my administration enabled the country to achieve high vaccination rates, which extended to children up to 12 years. Meanwhile, our focus on the construction, rehabilitation, and modernization of health facilities across the country, coupled with the enhanced capacities around biotechnology and the pharmaceutical value chain, attest to my government's determination to realize universal health coverage. Mr. President, lifting many more people out of poverty and into a higher quality of life must remain at the core of both United Nations activities and the programs and projects of our respective countries. Zimbabwe has made significant strides
towards ending poverty and hunger. This has seen the implementation of various policies and programs to support and empower communal and small-scale farmers. At the household level, the provision of agricultural inputs, equipment, and technical support to farmers, especially the vulnerable, has contributed to household and national food and nutrition security. However, in 2022, mid-season drought and tropical cyclones regrettably reduced the overall performance of the agricultural sector. To this end, the climate change conundrum has continued to be an albatross. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement should remain the primary platform for negotiating our collective global response to climate change. All measures taken to achieve the targets and commitments set under the Paris Agreement have to be implemented. Furthermore, the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities in light of the different national circumstances must also be reflected. Financing for climate change has remained inadequate, leaving the scope for effective and just transition to renewable energy among developing countries under serious threat. It is our hope that at COP27 in Egypt later this year, the developed countries will deliver more concrete action on climate change, not just for mitigation targets, but also in relation to adaptation, loss and damage, climate-specific finance, technology transfer, and capacity building. In our case, Zimbabwe is making concerted and deliberate efforts to integrate climate action into our national policies, strategies, and planning. This includes strengthening resilience and adaptive capacity of the most vulnerable in our society. Additionally, my government is implementing an ambitious program to increase the number of dams for irrigation. The program is expected to create green belts across the country as we reduce dependency on rain-fed agricultural activities while enhancing export-led production and productivity. Our comprehensive agriculture transformation strategy is focused on increasing production and productivity across the agriculture spectrum. This was instrumental in our unprecedented realization of national wheat self-sufficiency, as well as increased exports in horticulture. The provision of technical extension services for improved land and water use has seen widespread adoption of climate-smart agricultural innovations, with evident upward increase of incomes among communal and smallholder farmers, as well as women and youth in agriculture. Mr. President, Zimbabwe is committed to Agenda 2030 and has to this end mainstreamed the 17 SDGs into our National Economic Development Blueprint. The National Development Strategy, we acknowledge the support of the United Nations in the alignment of this strategy to the Sustainable Development Goals. Economic reforms have been implemented, resulting in significant progress in sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, mining, and tourism. Our Zimbabwe is open for business mantra
He has fostered a strong partnership between the government and the private sector for inclusive and sustainable development. Massive infrastructure development projects, which include the dams, energy plants, and the roads, have broadened our national economic asset base, as well as production and productivity enablers, while enhancing regional connectivity and integration. The current global financial architecture has demonstrated its inadequacies to address the challenges that confront us. Increasing and unsustainable debt burden, prohibitive cost of borrowing, illicit financial flows, and exploitation of natural resources from developing countries have all combined to relegate developing countries to the periphery of the global financial system. There is therefore need for a global financial system which is just, more inclusive, and responsive to the challenges we face. Equally, the international trade architecture under the World Trade Organization has remained largely exclusive and indifferent to the needs of developing countries. The African Continental Free Trade Area is thus expected to be the panacea for Africa to trade and stimulate economic growth and development. The AfCFTA must be complemented as we strive to improve production and trade in goods and services. Liberalization of services and the strengthening of competition policy and intellectual property rights, as well as the adoption of digital trade, should also be enhanced. Mr. President, education is a key driver of sustainable development with a direct impact on SDG 4, SDG 5, on gender equality, and SDG 17 on partnerships for the goals. Zimbabwe has embarked on reforms based on our heritage-based education 5.0 model, which emphasizes on science, technology, innovation, and industrialization. These are indeed necessary tools to leap forward the modernization and industrialization of our countries in the developing world. My government is equally providing quality, inclusive, and accessible education through the rollout of a phased free primary school education system. The Transforming Education Summit during this high-level week is a timely and a welcome development which should help revitalize the education sector, more so after COVID-19 induced disruptions. My country knows that more work needs to be done globally to close the gender gaps that are often aggravated in times of crisis. Opportunities are being created for all Zimbabweans, especially for women and the youth, to realize their individual and their collective potential. Milestones have thus been achieved in the implementation of SDG 5 on gender equality, leading to expanded empowerment and employment opportunities for both women and the youth. The proportional representation for women in Parliament is enshrined in the Constitution. Under my leadership, Zimbabwe has legislated reserved youth seats in the National Assembly. To further strengthen participatory democracy and good governance, my government has introduced a 30% quota for women in local authorities. This is more important as women bear the brunt of poor service delivery at the local level. The establishment of gender and youth focal desks within government ministries has helped to mainstream the issues of young people, particularly young women. Mr. President, sustainable socio-economic development is an indispensable imperative for the enjoyment of the fundamental rights of any people. The policy of devolution and decentralization has seen increased budgetary support directly to the local authorities. Communities right at the village, ward, and district levels are now making independent decisions and prioritizing their programs and projects informed by the most pressing needs at their level. This has seen the rapid construction of schools, clinics, water and sanitation infrastructure, and other social amenities in the most remote areas of Zimbabwe. In the same vein, my government is promoting heritage-based rural industrialization to guarantee improved livelihoods and incomes of all communities based on their respective unique natural resources endowments. Mr. President, Zimbabwe is modernizing, industrializing, based on our local resources and the human capital base. Inspired by the historic monument, the Great Zimbabwe, from which our country's name is derived, we are building our country brick by brick, stone upon stone, with the support of our friends and partners. As my government continues to entrench democracy, good governance, and the rule of law, we are committed to vibrant, competitive, and peaceful political contestations. Notwithstanding our success, the ongoing deleterious effects of the illegal sanctions continue to hamper and slow down our progress and the realization of sustainable and inclusive development. Zimbabwe is a peace-loving country. We remain indebted to the SADC region and the African Union, as well as other progressive members in the Committee of Nations, for their unwavering support and calls for the removal of these unwarranted and unjustified sanctions on Zimbabwe. We once again call for their immediate and unconditional removal. My country welcomes the findings of the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the negative impact of the unilateral coercive measures on the enjoyment of human rights who visited Zimbabwe in 2021. Mr. President, at the international level, Zimbabwe has adopted an engagement and re-engagement policy. The policy is underpinned by the principles of mutual understanding and respect, cooperation, partnership, and shared values with other members of the international community. We desire to be a friend to all and an enemy to none. My country is greatly concerned that more than 20 years after the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, hate crimes, xenophobia, racial discrimination, and intolerance have continued to increase at an alarming rate, including at international level. There is need, therefore, to recommit to fighting these scourges in all their forms and manifestations. The spread of terrorism and intensification of all the conflicts on the African continent and throughout the world have been a setback to our quest to silence the guns. In Southern Africa, we remain seized with insecurity and a terrorist insurgency in northern parts of Cabo Delgado in Mozambique and the conflicts in parts of the Great Lakes region. Emboldened by our SADC regional philosophy that an injury to one is an injury to all, we continue to pool our resources to fight terrorism and other threats to peace, security, and stability in our region. We appeal to the United Nations to render the requisite support to our efforts to restore peace in the affected areas. Zimbabwe stands committed to playing its part for the realization of peace and security within various United Nations, African Union and SADC peacekeeping and peace-building missions. The scale and gravity of our challenges today cannot be addressed through old structures and the old ways of doing business. Zimbabwe subscribes to the Ezulwini Consensus and the City Declaration as the sustainable approach to the reform of the United Nations Security Council. Mr. President, in conclusion, Zimbabwe reaffirms its commitment to the principles of the United Charter and the multilateralism in the resolution of the complex and intersecting challenges facing our world. The implementation of the inclusive 2030 agenda remains our biggest hope for the future we all want. There is indeed a more compelling case for enhanced solidarity, cooperation, and partnerships if we are to respond effectively to these challenges and ensure our collective survival. The United Nations should remain the beacon and a source of hope for the global citizenry. As leaders, we have a weighty burden and responsibility to make the United Nations deliver to the expectations of all the peoples of this world. I thank you for your kind attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. Now the Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Umaro Sissoco Embalo, President of the Republic of Guinea-Bissau. I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Mr. President, honorable heads of state and government, Mr. General Secretary, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to warmly congratulate Mr. Kasaba Korosi from Hungary for his election as the President of the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I would also like to congratulate the Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his commitment to world peace, and Mr. Abdullah Sahid from the Maldives for the results that he achieved during his term. Mr. President, much has been said by the eminent speakers who were before me on this podium, which allows me to avoid certain repetition. The time has come for us to think of a global and lasting solution based on solidarity, sustainability, science, as the themes of this session calls us to do. Because the solution to many of our problems is in the joint reflection, global solidarity, and the pursuit of concerted and collective actions. The COVID-19 pandemic tragically reminded us that we live in a globalized world, that the lives of all human beings have equal value, that humanity is one, and that we have a common destiny. We must share scientific knowledge and ensure equitable access to vaccines. Mr. President, During the last 2 years, we were able to create greater political stability in our country, reaffirm our role in the African continent, and reclaim our place in the concert of nations. However, the international context does not favor the full implementation of our development plan, particularly in respect to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. In Africa, we're also feeling the consequences of the war in Ukraine, whose impact is unfortunately broad, particularly in the energy and agricultural sectors. Inflation and increased prices of grains and other staples have considerably worsened a food situation that was already challenging. Guinea-Bissau is a coastal country with a great number of islands. We have dedicated much effort to mitigation and the adaptation. And we hope that COP27 will be a deciding step in defining and adopting concrete strategies to minimize the negative impacts of climate changes. Mr. President, allow me, as the chairman of the authority of the ECOWAS heads of state and government, to remind you that our sub-region faces great security challenges and that we need peace in order to ensure the development and well-being of our people, who are our primary wealth. The stability of a great part of our continent in general, and of West Africa in particular, is threatened by the insecurity caused by terrorism, violent extremism, and transnational crime, which violates the principles of the rule of law and democracy. ECOWAS created a political and legal framework and structural mechanisms to prevent and resolve political and institutional crises. However, the challenges continue to be numerous and difficult to overcome. We need international assistance to stop the advance of terrorism in West Africa and in the entire Sahel region. This is a threat to international peace and security, and in order to combat it effectively, we must involve the entire international community and the UN in particular. Mr. President, I was recently chosen to chair the African Leaders Malaria Alliance, ALMA. According to the WHO data, 96% of the malaria cases globally and 98% of the malaria deaths occur in Africa. Our continent has not achieved the establishment of the goals to reduce malaria and mortality by 40% by 2020. And this was a fundamental step in the eliminating malaria in the African continent by 2030. Therefore, more than ever, we need to adopt appropriate measures to protect all, everywhere, from infectious diseases. I would like to take this opportunity to call on all countries, governments, donors, and development partners to contribute to the replenishment of the global fund. Together and in solidarity, we can end malaria once and for all and save millions of human lives. Mr. President, speaking of solidarity among states and peoples, we cannot forget to mention Cuba and the need for this American embargo against our fellow nation to be immediately lifted. In conclusion, I want to emphasize that Guinea-Bissau, despite being a small country with limited means, will not spare any efforts in order to contribute to maintaining peace, stability, and security on our planet. We are resolute in continuing to actively participate in the consolidation of multilateralism and the promotion of dialogue and cooperation among the nations and peoples of the world. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Guinea-Bissau for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Azale Assoumani, President of the Union of Comoros. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Azale Assoumani, President of the Union of Comoros, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Excellence.
President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, Your Majesties, Excellencies, distinguished representatives of Member States, ladies and gentlemen. Above all, I would like to address my warm congratulations to His Excellency Mr. Abdullah Shahid for the efficiency with which he led the work of the 76th session of our General Assembly, and His Excellency Mr. Kasaba Korosi, who succeeded him. I congratulate you on your outstanding election, and I can assure you of the solidarity of the Comores in your task. I would also like to thank His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, for his sustained commitment, and all of his team for their work in the service of peace and development. Majesties, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this 77th session of the UN General Assembly is being held at a particularly delicate time in the life of the international community. From one year to the next, the face of the world has changed, and for 3 years now, our countries have been facing the worst health crisis of our history, notably the COVID-19 pandemic. This pandemic, as you will know, has brought all countries of the world to its knees and has shown that all countries, big and small, all face these risks from disease. And this is really one of the worst crises that the planet has ever had to face. In that regard, the Union of the Comores once again would like to address our thanks to all of those that have worked so quickly to provide effective solutions within months, giving hope again to the world that progressively we could come out of this crisis, which has seriously damaged the world economy. And as if that weren't enough, another crisis caused by the invasion of Ukraine has shown once again the dramatic way in which the multilateral system is fragile. And yet this is what we come here together to discuss today. The price of wheat and other foodstuffs have reached levels never seen before, and this is endangering food security by increasing the risk of shortages and of famine. And that is why my country condemns in the utmost manner this invasion, and we call upon the international community to convince Russia and Ukraine to pursue the path of dialogue as soon as possible. That is the only way to end hostilities. And I would also like to welcome the Istanbul Agreement of last July, led under the auspices of Mr. Erdogan, President of Turkey, and Mr. Antonio Guterres, allowing the export of millions of tons of cereals that were blocked in Ukrainian ports. Those agreements must be consolidated. They are proof that dialogue can and should always take precedence in order to avoid the world falling into chaos and into misery. Ladies and gentlemen, apart from the concerns linked to the conflict, the health crisis, the current food crisis, the community of nations must continue to find the most appropriate solutions to the political and territorial claims of states. And that is why I reiterate here, on behalf of my delegation, the imperative need to find rapid, just and fair solutions to the flagrant injustice being suffered by Palestine. We have to find a solution that will ensure the rights of the Palestinian people to have a sovereign state of their own, with East Jerusalem as their capital, living in peace and harmony with the state of Israel, because, as they say, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your neighbors. With regard to the Moroccan Sahara, I repeat the support of the Comores to the Moroccan nature of the Sahara. The autonomy of this region as part of the sovereignty of Morocco, in our view, that is the best basis to bring about a rapid, pragmatic and lasting solution to this regional conflict which has lasted for far too long. And my government also strongly encourages dialogue between the brotherly countries of Morocco and Algeria, and we welcome all initiatives that could help to ensure peace in this region, particularly the relaunch of the political process on the basis of Security Council resolutions. And along the same lines, with regard to the sovereignty of states, the Union of the Comores repeats our position with regard to the need for China to be able to recover its sovereignty over the island of Taiwan. Given the threats that we see today hovering over peace, my government would call upon all stakeholders in various conflicts to show a sense of responsibility and restraint. In the particularly difficult area of the Sahel, we know from experience just how dangerous it can be to allow areas of tension to develop. They then become fertile ground for the expansion of international terrorism. My government in Eastern Africa has seen Al-Shabaab. This is a threat to the entire continent, and I reaffirm here, as I did last year before this august assembly, that these groups that threaten peace in the world are not Muslims. They are simply terrorists that have nothing to do with Islam, which is a religion of peace, tolerance and living together. However, we are aware that behind these current terrorist movements that we have to fight, we also have a lot of frustration amongst the young people that don't see a future for themselves. And here I would call upon the great powers of this world that their support is capital to contribute to the social and economic development of countries. That is very important to respond to the needs of the beneficiaries of this aid. Peace and security in the world need prevention. Prevention is the only way that we will be able to address problems upstream through diplomacy. This is how we can address the difficult issues that are threatening peace in the world. And of course, if we're talking about conflict, we have the territorial dispute between my country and France with regard to Mayotte. Like previous governments, we would recall before this August Assembly, formally, that in accordance with international law, this island is Comoran in nature, and the sovereignty was removed during the decolonization process. This is a painful dossier, and it's gone on now for more than 40 years. But we hope that we welcome the dialogue that has been created between the French and the Comoran counterparts. Ladies and gentlemen, the principles and the values of the United Nations are now focused on the Sustainable Development Goals, and each country has made these a priority. We would recall that climate change is one of the most important aspects of these SDG goals. Whole regions are going to disappear, and others are on a daily basis facing climate phenomena such as flooding, intense droughts, fires, the loss of coastline and acidification. If this disaster spares no country or region, and small island developing states such as the Comores are in a particularly bad situation, and they need greater attention to be paid to them by leaders. And I take this opportunity to once again express our condolences and our support and sympathy to the people and authorities of Pakistan, to all those families that have lost family members through the flooding in that country. We are also facing other dangerous phenomena such as piracy, pollution, illegal fishing, the pillaging of marine resources, and drug trafficking and people trafficking. They require great attention to be paid. And we are part of all regional and global initiatives in order to fight these barbaric acts, which are a serious threat for the security of goods and people. And that is why I have always attached the greatest importance to the security of our geo-strategic area, particularly in the Mozambique Channel and the southwest of the Indian Ocean. Ladies and gentlemen, my country, the Union of the Comores, has just celebrated its 47th year of independence. And the first 2 decades saw a lot of troubles and political instability, but for 20 years now, thank God, the country has been able to find again peace and stability. We need to do everything to ensure that we can consolidate this political stability. That is a real yardstick of the socio-economic development of the country. We need a peaceful society that is cohesive and inclusive of all its components, and that is why, in order to bring about greater peace and social cohesion, in last February, we held a national political dialogue aimed at bringing together the citizens of the Comores around essential goals, namely peace, security, towards lasting economic and social development. And that's why I would like to thank all partners that have provided their support to this dialogue. I am convinced that all political forces in the country that took part in those important talks will work towards consolidating what's been achieved over the years and ensure democratic changes of power and development in the country. With regard to human rights now, allow me to stress that my country works closely with regional and international bodies that are tasked with implementing the quadrennial review in 2019. Essential reforms have been implemented, showing the willingness of my country to ensure that human rights are a national priority. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, with regard to the social situation, COVID-19 has forced countries to give priority to the management of the pandemic. We had 2 waves in the Comores. The second was more virulent than the first, with a number of victims. Nevertheless, the situation was mastered in the country, overcome thanks to the early measures taken by the authorities and supported in that, as we were, by all of our bi- and multilateral partners and civil society, and I would like to thank them all here once again. The Union of the Comores, thankfully, today is an island country and has taken steps to avoid a new outbreak of this disease. The government thanks countries helping us with this crisis arising from COVID and also worsened by the Ukrainian crisis. I welcome the action of all development partners helping the Comores, and once again I thank you for your help. With the United Nations system and a new framework for sustainable development that has just been signed for the next 5 years, that perfectly aligns with the Emerging Comores development plan. That is our plan for the development of the country. All of these efforts combined of the government and of partners bi- and multilateral partners should move towards a common goal, namely to see our country improve by 2030. And we plan to organize at the beginning of December a follow-up seminar for the conference of the Partners in Development that was held in France in 2019 in order to accompany these challenges before us before 2030. And here I would like to appeal to all of our partners that we find ways together to move towards meeting our Paris commitments to fund the various projects in the program. Regionally, we attach particular importance to cooperation between the Comores and the countries with which we share a common destiny in the Indian Ocean. We also participate in regional efforts to ensure security in the East African area, and we provide our support to the friendly Republic of Mozambique in their struggle against terrorism, a scourge which spares no country. International solidarity is therefore important in order to fight this scourge and ensure all of our security. We come each year to the United Nations to express our interest in multilateralism and our conviction of the essential role of this organization to make the world a more humane place. And this year, we renew our commitment to work for the goods of everyone, the good of everyone. And I'd like to stress the need for the international community to continue to be unified and to show solidarity that we will find appropriate solutions to the great challenges of our times for more peace, progress, and for the good of ourselves and future generations. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Union of the Comoros for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency George Mani Weah, President of the Republic of Liberia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Liberia, to welcome His Excellency George Mani Weah, President of the Republic of Liberia, and invite him to address the Assembly.
His Excellency Saba Korosi, President of the 77th United Nations General Assembly, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to address this 77 sections of the United Nations General Assembly on behalf of the government and people of Liberia. Let me congratulate His Excellency Saba Korosi on his election as President of this 77 sections of the United Nations General Assembly and assure him of Liberia's further support. I would also like to commend your predecessor, His Excellency Mr. Abdullah Shahid, for a job well done in administering the affairs of the 76 sections of the General Assembly. Let me also extend my profound thanks and appreciation to His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, for his remarkable and visionary leadership. This year's assembly is taking place at a difficult time when even as the world is recovering from the scourge of COVID-19. We continue to face the challenges of the war in Ukraine, climate change and its devastating effects on our environment. Just as the Ukrainian people are enduring the harsh impact of this unwarranted military incursion, the rest of the world is feeling the harsh consequences of economic downturn caused by disruption in global supply chain, food insecurity, and rising prices of basic goods and services. The theme of this year's assembly, a watershed movement, transformative solutions to interlocking challenges, is both appropriate and meaningful. It not only reminds us about the current state of our world and provide us the space to reflect on the multiple challenges that confront us today. They include the health and socio-economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, the devastating effects of climate change, environmental concerns, poverty reduction, food insecurity, and gender inequality. The challenges confronting the world today will require immediate collective global actions with the United Nations at the center of the search for solutions. In so doing, we must give special consideration to the needs of developing countries, particularly the least developed countries, in line with the Doha Program of Action for Least Developed Countries for the decade 2022-2031. Working together with the United Nations family, Liberia hereby commits to protect our planet, to promote peace, prevent conflicts, to ensure sustainable financing, and to boost partnership. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this commitment is reflected in the proper agenda for prosperity and development, which embodies the expressions of our shared determination to achieve peace, prosperity, national development, address extreme poverty, inequalities, regional disparities, infrastructure deficit, climate change, and equitable distribution of our national wealth. Given Liberia's youthful populations of more than 60%, my government initiated a youth rehabilitation and empowerment program, the Social Economic Empowerment of Disadvantaged Youth Project, between 2019 and 2021, with the subsequent launch of a $13 million United States national fund drive for the rehabilitation and empowerment of at-risk youth in Liberia. We remain of the firm conviction that when empowered, our youth can be a positive force for good. As Liberia Feminine in Chief, women empowerment and the promotion of gender equality remain key priorities of my government. Women do not only comprise almost half of our country's population, but they also play important roles at all levels of society and must be given equal deserved attention, support, and a place at the leadership and governance table in our society. To this end, we have developed a legal framework, including the ratification of regional and international instruments to address gender inequality, which are being carried out as a result of social, cultural perception, practices, and stereotypes that support male dominance and the subordination of women. I would like to inform you that my government, together with the UN partners, is implementing the EU Spotlight Initiative to end violence and harmful traditional practices against women and girls and promote their sexual and productive health and rights. Furthermore, the government of Liberia is currently implementing a $50 million United States ECOWAS-funded project to enhance the capacity of female entrepreneurs. Mr. President, I wish to express Liberia's sincere gratitude to our local and international partners, both multilateral and bilateral, for their continued support to our national efforts in combating the pandemic. As a result of that support, Liberia is well on its way to achieving herd immunity, hopefully by the end of this year, with 67% of the population already fully vaccinated. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, my government continues to take actions through the formulations of new policy framework and strategic interventions to address the impacts of climate change and protect the environment. Liberia commits to achieving a target of 64% reduction in carbon emission below business as usual by 2030. We anticipate that the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Egypt, COP27, will provide the opportunity to accelerate actions towards the goal of the Paris Agreement and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Mr. President, Excellencies, sustainable development can take place only in a peaceful and secure environment. In fulfillment of our commitment to the maintenance of regional and global peace and security, Liberia takes pride as a troop-contributing country, with Liberian troops and other security apparatus serving in the United Nations multidimensional integrated stabilization mission in Mali, the United Nations mission in South Sudan, and the United Nations Interim Security Forces for Abai. We thank the United Nations and our bilateral, international, multilateral partners for the support we continue to receive in facilitating our contribution to global and regional peace and security. Mr. President, Excellencies, I am pleased to report that the IMF latest appraisal of the ongoing program it has with Liberia is very positive. It shows that inflation rates have been significantly reduced. There are now better prospects for economic growth compared to previous years in spite of the negative effects of COVID-19. Our effort at instituting new policy measures to fight grabs were also particularly commended in the report, along with our adherence to prudent fiscal management. Mr. President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, democracy in Liberia also continued to grow from strength to strength. After many years of civil upheaval, Liberia is becoming a stronghold for peace and a safe haven for democracy. This is because we have taken actions in the last few years to build and strengthen democratic institutions such as the press and the Liberian judiciary. We have put forward new legislation that empower the media while eradicating those that have tended to suppress free speech. I am proud to say that from the beginning of my administration to date, there is no political prisoner in Liberia. Our regional conferences of the Mana River Union and the ECOWAS, which have been called to discuss efforts to restore democracy in a few troubled spots in our West African region, Liberia has constantly and consistently pleaded for a strict adherence to constitutional terms limit and for a return to democratic civilian rule in cases of military takeover. Liberia is expected to hold presidential and legislative elections in October 2023. The forthcoming election will be crucial to consolidating our democracy. In this regard, I wish to underscore my government's unwavering commitment to ensuring that the enabling environment continues to exist for the conduct of peaceful, free, fair, transparent, and inclusive elections. This is in keeping with my commitment to ensure that the democratic will of the Liberian people is respected at all times. In the run-up to the 2023 elections, it is incumbent upon all prospective candidates to avoid the incitement of violence and any other behavior that could deprive the Liberian people of the peaceful space that they need to freely exercise their franchise and freely express their political will in choosing their leaders. We must let the people decide, and then we must respect their decision. This is indeed the true essence of democracy. Mr. President, Excellencies, if we must advance common good of humanity, the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, then international cooperation must be given primacy, and the principles of solidarity must have its rightful place. We have the platform to generate the transformative solutions we seek. The world is watching. Our people are watching. And we must now seize the moment, confront the challenges, and collectively endeavor to lift the poor from poverty and hunger, sickness and disease, and ensure progress, development, and prosperity for all. At the same time, we must protect our planet, guarantee and maintain global peace, security, and stability. Mr. President, we must pursue efforts to make the United Nations more efficient, more effective, more inclusive, more accountable, and more suited for the purpose. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Liberia for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency.
And I tell you, from wherever you're watching, I like to say welcome right here to KMTV. We are everywhere. That's why we are right here, coming to you live and direct from the heart of Brooklyn Center in Minnesota. And you just watched President George Manuel Weah's address to the 77th General Assembly. That's the United Nations General Assembly. Very shortly, we will be going into the nitty-gritty of the president's address. As you know, there were a lot of punches. Nathan is here with me. Nathan been jacking down some notes as we listen along to the president. Will be joining us also Mr. Michael Patmo. Michael Patmo is an independent mind. He will be joining us to give us his own perspective on the address coming from President Weah to the 77th General Assembly of the United Nations. We'll be looking at the different things playing. We understand there have been Liberians who traveled into New York City to kind of support the president's appearance there on the war stage. That's the United Nations General Assembly. We will be talking about that. We will be looking at other issues as well arising from be it New York or other cities where people, are kind of supporting President Weah's presentation today at the United Nations General Assembly. So if you are there, we'd like to say welcome. Keep sharing the link. Keep watching. Very shortly, we will bring you indeed, what's happening there at the UNGA with the different teams. And Nathan, you watch it. Let's start up with you. What do you make of the entire, presentation today by President Weah? Let's start up from your end.
It was indeed a great speech.
Mm-hmm.
Summary just that there were a lot of repeated words from the starting of the speech to the end.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of things he repeatedly said in terms of focusing on security. When you're doing such a speech, hit the point and move ahead. So the structure of the speech, there was an issue there for me. I will also delve into that. But he made salient points, right? Salient point, because he spoke about the issue of security in Liberia. That was respecting the rights of everyone after election. He also spoke about the climate change, committing his government effort, towards climate change, youth empowerment. He also spoke about that. So basically, the UN is focusing on improving the lives of ordinary, protecting the climate. So we are gave some highlights. So when we come back, I'm jotting down the points, and I will go into them.
And I know is something that a lot of people watch, from different angles, and we know that these people are all, analyzing. There were a lot of thoughts out there. What do we expect from President Weah? Whether he's going to be speaking on. But you said it correctly. That is the issue of climate change. He started with still the fight against COVID and its impact continuously. And what else he talked about? The
youth empowerment.
Youth empowerment.
He started his speech first by saying that the war in Ukraine, things are changing, inflation, prices are changing. So he started his speech that, hey, we are faced with these challenges in the world.
Okay.
After COVID, the war in Ukraine is turning everything around. The issue of gas price, food, and other stuff that's been on the increase. Then he went down to the issue of calling on the issue for peace, right? Peace through all the war. He made mention of that, how his government is contributing towards the security situation in Mali. As you know, Liberia has a Chuba battalion in Mali. He also spoke about that. The issue of women empowerment. He said, as you know, that issue of that stereotype, that cultural stereotype that women should be, seated at the back. His government is putting forth programs, implementing programs to empower youth, develop them, provide micro loans or grants for them. Talking about economic empowerment. That's what he meant by that. And he said his government on the EU spotlight. There's a project that his government is running on the European Union. They are there promoting that stuff. You're talking about the 50K ECOWAS gave towards female empowerment. So these are all women empowerment. On the issue with climate change that I made mention, he said his government is achieving that by 64% carbon emission. By 2030, they want to reach that because that's the UN focus. By 2030, reducing carbon emission. The issue of security, we have said he's making effort to ensure that Liberia is peaceful. As you know, we have a fragile peace. He said at home, they are mounting that peace, and in Mali, the army is contributing towards that. He also said the IMF, the latest appraisal, talking about the economic development in Liberia, how transparency, good governance is happening in Liberia. He said the IMF latest appraisal on his government program is very positive.
Gives a positive, that's a positive note right there.
He said inflation rate has reduced. So that's the argument for people who in the business sector, who will read the economists, they're going to argue that if inflation rate has reduced, and he said there are better prospects. After COVID, he made mention that his COVID threw his government back, and now the fight against corruption grift. That's one thing he said, that he lauded the effort that his government is fighting. That's another big argument. This is government fighting
corruption in Liberia. And that is something, a lot of people want to argue, whether there is really a fight against corruption in Liberia. What is his government doing? We know that they went as far as giving the LSCC, extra power, that is prosecutorial power, to the legislature. But is the fight really taking place in Liberia against corruption, when in fact we've seen 3 of his officials recently getting hit by sanctions from the U.S. based on what they term as corruption, or So, but these are, like you put it, these are things that people will continue to argue.
Is it the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, latest report speak highly about that. On the issue of democracy, President Weah said Liberia is becoming a stronghold for peace and democracy. So that's another thing. He made mention of the press and the judiciary. He said there is no prisoner, there is no one in prison. We don't have better yellow, right?
There is no political prisoner, currently, according to him.
Yeah, on his government. And the judiciary, he's trying to reform it on the issue of the MRU, the Minor River Union. He said they are pushing forth that any military government that take power should return to a civilian rule. That's one of his arguments Liberia has been pushing for. And in 2023 election, we have said the election is very critical, right? And he said his government is committed to ensuring
there is a peaceful,
enabling environment where everybody will have that power to exercise their right. But he warned that if there is a run-up, those who go into run-up should not incite people. Let the will of the people be decided and heard and abide by. So he also committed himself, because
it starts with him.
It starts with
him, yeah.
And there are clear signs that he will be in the runner-up, because I know always in Liberia, the ruling party and the opposition, if they come together,
the top opposition will go with the ruling party.
If there will be a runner-up.
So we have Michael Padmo in queue with us. Let's see whether we can get Michael here. Mike, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, if you can just be a little bit audible, that would be better. And you listen to President Weah's address. And firstly, before we since we've already welcomed you, we also have David Collet in queue as well. David, are you there? Are you getting us, David?
Are you getting me?
David, are you there? Are you getting us?
Yeah, I'm getting you. I'm getting you, Cyrus.
All right. I'm getting you better off now. So we have you joining us as well as Michael Padmo. But sadly we cannot bring all of us on the screen at the same time. But we can interchange the page up here. So let's jump back to you, Michael. Tell us firstly, what is it like? With the president's address today, what's your own perception?
Well, I thought the president looked very presidential, looked very crisp, looked very attentive, awake. I thought that his speech was well delivered. It was well paced, and some of the information that he provided was very prudent, especially speaking about the oncoming elections, the situation of the youth in Liberia, what we commonly call Zogos.
The disadvantaged youth.
Yeah, disadvantaged youth. There you go, disadvantaged youth, as well as gender violence. I think he spoke well to those things. I was hoping the president would have given a little bit more information, on what is being done. Just mentioning it, I don't believe it's enough. I really hope he had given a little bit of juice. I mean, I recognize the time. He's on a time limit. He has to squeeze a lot of things in. But I was just hoping when it comes to whether it's the gender violence, or the youth, or even our political dispensation when it comes to violence. I was just hoping that he would have given us a little bit more information on something like that.
Okay, Micah, that was a good piece indeed. But let's bring in David. David Collet is Assistant Minister at the Ministry of Information, Cultural Affairs, and Tourism. David, I know you're still sitting at your office and working, and you were following the president's address. What's your own impression? You listen to Micah.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone listening. I think the president's message was brilliantly delivered. Uh, I think the president met our expectation as a government and people in every facet. He touched the key areas. He touched national security. He touched women empowerment. He touched youth empowerment. He touched democratic governance and the rule of law. The president was also able to talk about um, the elections, which is one of the key areas that the nation is bracing for. Next year, we are going to be having democratic elections. The president talked about the government's commitment to ensuring that there is a free, fair, transparent, and a level playing field for everyone participating in elections, and that Liberians will have the opportunity again to, um, go to the polls and vote and elect the person they want. The president also talked about, which is very key, not having any political prisoner, which is very key. That shows that the government, is not like in time past where people who speak ill about the government will, basically have charges cooked up against them and they are in prison. The president talked also about that. The president talked about Liberia bracing to meet its Millennium Development Goals, which is also very important in terms of climate change. 64% is more than the threshold set for African countries. The president also talked about 69% of Liberians being immunized, have already taken the vaccines, the COVID vaccine. The president talked about our support also to United Nations Charter, and he congratulated the leaders of the United Nations. I think the president's message was important, especially trying to allay some of the fear from people within the opposition community that the pending elections, the upcoming elections, will not be a level playing field. And I think the president's emphasis on these elections, these pending elections, were very important.
Now, David, just before we bring you back, we'll ask that you can just make some adjustment with your headroom or your camera. When we get you on the screen, you kind of like, too into. Yes, just make some adjustment there. So, Michael, you listen to David. Let's take bit by bit the issue of committing to free and fair election. You will agree with me, and every other person on here will agree with me. That is something that the world is going to be watching. After 12 years of Madame Sirleaf, the first time we had a peaceful transfer of power was after Madame Sirleaf. That happened after years. Now, President Weah is going to a second term. He's making these promises. What do you think the people on the other side, people in the opposition community, will take this commitment he's made or remade, to especially on this larger stage of war gathering? What do you think about that?
Thank you so much. So yeah, the country is bracing for that. I mean, it's one thing to make these promises, but there's still things that the Liberian people are waiting to see. We congratulate the president on not having any political prisoners. We congratulate the president on um, the free speech that is being exercised in Liberia. But for example, Henry Costa, Martin Colley are still out of Liberia, and we know they left under not very good circumstances. Um, there has been some move to the government by the government towards inviting Mr. Costa back. I would like to see a more general approach from the government that the government basically invites all of its citizens and steps forward and makes a commitment that upon their return they will be safe and no harm will come to them. The other thing that concerning the elections that I'm really hoping that our government can address. Like I said, the president just touched on a few things, but we are really looking for more meat. One is, the opposition community has expressed grave concern in the magistrates being all fired and replaced, as well as so far we have not conducted a census. There's also introduction of certain biometric that has not been tested, or the voter roll has not been cleaned up. So those are the steps I believe that Liberians are looking for, not just talk, but action by our president and excuse me, and the National Elections Commission that will actually solidify what the president is saying. So hopefully, going into December here, we'll actually see those things turn into action. I must applaud the president and the government that after a series of violent interaction protests, we're able to see the university students come out and do their, if you want to call it a protest or action, and peacefully, and everything ended up peacefully. We're hoping that is the beginning of how things will go during this election cycle. That will really help to allay the fears of everyday Liberians when it comes to security, and the lack of violence. So for me, that's why I really saw that act. There was a point in time when there were videos being played of the mayor, saying certain things that were concerning, and then we saw the video of the young man from Soup being disrobed, naked and beaten, and then we see a protest where there's no violence, the police are there, they protect the protesters, and even give them food and water at the end of the day. Now, I'm not saying the government should commit to feeding the people every time, but that was a great gesture. And like I said before, I'm hoping that is just the beginning of of more to come during these election times that are coming up.
Sorry for the break in there. I know we're trying to get some things up and running here, like it should be. So, David, you listen to Michael, and Michael, you struck one serious point: the issue of there's no political prisoner. You talk about Martin Colley. You talk about Henry Pedro Costa. But I think in recent time, you heard Costa say the president reached out to him, and the smoke peaks pipe at some level, though he's still firing Costa. As you know, Costa is always Costa. So, but he announced that he's in Liberia December. He's going to be in Liberia December. So do you think that's going to be a test to this extending of olive branch, and where we see, whether people could still be intimidated, quote unquote, like you put it?
Absolutely. I think that would be a great test to the commitment of this government, towards people who speak against it. I think Costa returning home peacefully and being able to enjoy I believe he's an aspiring senator to Monserrato, so there is going to become a heated time there. But I think that will be a beginning, a real good foundation if Henry Costa is able to return home. I remember the last time Henry Costa returned home, there was a skirmish and, and there were people running and everything. Hopefully this time it won't be that way. I think this will be a true test. And I think if Henry Costa can return home safely in December without any of those intimidations, I think it will really, really encourage others to also return home and and contribute to our national dispensation, which will only make Liberia better. So yes, indeed, it will be a good one.
Sorry, guys. David, you heard that I was asking whether if Costa gets to return to Liberia in December, it's going to be a test to government since, in fact, President we are extending an olive branch, and he made it clear that no one was after Costa. But we don't know about the issue of Martin Colley. What would you want to say? You listen to Michael.
Thank you, Cyrus. First of all, um, there are no issues here with the Costa thing. Heron Costa is a free man. Martin Colley is a free man. The government has never pursue Martin Colley at any point in time. He's not in a hot pursuit list. He's not a fugitive. We are not looking for him. There is no raid out there for him. There's no legal process out there for him. Martin Colley has done nothing to the government. He's a free man. He's welcome to come to his country anytime, because I don't just want to go into trivialities that Martin Colley is out there in exile and he's saying that the government is pursuing him. What I like to say about the Heron Costa thing, the president did reach out to Heron Costa, and after all the noise about Costa um, and carrying on fraudulent, and he was involved with fraud and everything, immigration fraud, and then he left the country after the government was asking him to come in and answer some questions. He left the country. The president was very magnanimous to reach out to Costa and basically say to him, "Hey, I don't have any issues with you. This is your country. This is your government. I'm the president for everyone. You can come back to your country, and all the charges against you are dropped." Aside from that, there was a video, some pictures of Henry Costa parading the internet. The government, specifically as a responsible government, issued a directive through the Solicitor General's office to ban the circulation of those pictures and those videos of Henry Costa. That tells you the level of, you know, um, um, democratic, support the president is giving every citizen. It's not that because Henry Costa is a tough guy, he's always saying stuff, most of which are not true sometimes, and he says stuff about the government, and he also insults the president. But there was a directive from the office of the Solicitor General, by the former Solicitor General, Serena Seaforth, banning those pictures and that video from circulating the internet. So the president, has an open arm to everyone else. You can come back home. You can work in your country. You can come back home and protest. And now going to the side of the soup protest. That soup protest demonstrated to the world that President Weah is a democratic president. He doesn't have any history of violence. He supports peace. He was one-time UNICEF ambassador for children. He helped to disarm thousands of child soldiers. He was also the peace ambassador during the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf time, where he served briefly before going to contest elections in the Senate. So this president is a man of peace. One of the things the president also said was the $13.5 million that he's working with partners to help support at-risk youth. At-risk youth are basically victims of the happenings of the events of the war. These young people, some of them found themselves into taking drugs. They would take drugs and go on the front line. And these challenges are a threat to the national security of the state. People here, because they want to take drugs, they go and inject people phone, they are committing robbery, they are in the streets, it is just a risk, associated thing with these at-risk youth. So the president is supporting the government, has already committed $1.5 million to that program. the USAID, the European Union, all of them are giving support to this program. We are hoping that this program is going to kick off, and Liberians can enjoy the benefit of it, especially our at-risk youth brothers.
All right, guys. We just hold you there. I know Nathan wants to come in as well, and you got anything for any of the guys?
Yes, I mean, David is doing what he's paid to do. Michael is sitting on the fence and doing from his saying information that he thinks are relevant. But I just want to chip in here, like Michael said, making commitment, and for us seeing tangibles or reality on the ground is another thing. I agree with you, David, that yes, government is making gains and inviting Costa and stuff like that. But we're looking at security, right? We know that security is fragile in Liberia. The issue, what is the real government doing to support our security apparatus? Looking at the police, are the police visible in all areas? Are they accessible? I mean, we don't have that number of police. Do they have logistics? Right? The election is just around the corner. How can we secure our area? We have had a lot of ritualistic killings, right? People are not afraid to be outside 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the night. I know a couple of lawmakers, they have alleged that they cannot go to some areas because of their own security. People, even the pimping riders, they have limit now. You can't. So we're talking about elections. That's a different euphoria. So what are those tangibles? That's why we're missing in the president's speech, that he's improving security in Liberia. The issue of you heard Princess Kuba made mention of. So we need to see these tangibles. So security, I did not hear that in that speech. What is it? Okay, there is no political prisoner, but are people mentally praising? Are people psychologically praising? So are people not speaking out? It's like, I cannot speak on certain things because if I speak out, they would tie they would clip my legs. Looking at Yeke Koluba, he has alleged that all of his businesses has been clipped out. So that's another form of insecurity. If I don't feel secure to talk, because hey, when Nathan Charles talk today, he will not get on another radio. So these are all things. Yes, though you.
Yeah, go ahead. He's listening.
Well, I thought he was calling me.
No, he's listening.
Calling you. I was calling because I want to also deal with the allegations. I like to deal with them fast, and I like to deal.
Ooh, we're getting some network issue there, and let's see whether David comes back incorrectly. David, are you hearing us?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Go right ahead.
There are no insecurity issues in Liberia. Absolutely zero insecurity issues in Liberia. The police, the Liberian National Police, has demonstrated that it has the capacity to provide policing for the country. The crime statistics, for instance, when we came into office, was very high. The challenges the security apparatus face is logistics. The government has been working with our tight fiscal envelope to be able to continue to provide the needed resources and funding for the Liberian National Police and other security apparatuses like the DEA, the Liberian Immigration Service, and the Drug Enforcement Agency to provide security for the state. Now, allegations of ritualistic killing have always been imaginary. For instance, I give you one example. There was this guy who alleged back in, I think, March of this year that he was in a in a keke, and they took him to Batala, but while on their way to Batala, someone gave him an injection, and then they threw him in the truck, and one girl was there. The girl told him to shut up, and he went to Batala, and then he was inside. They caught somebody neck outside, and the blood flashed on him inside, and all of these make-up lies, these stories, where the basis for all the erroneous and incorrect allegations against the government that it was not providing security for the state. Now, when these people were called to come forth and help provide information about what really happened, most of them did disappear. They hid themselves. In fact, as the Ministry of Justice, through the intelligence infrastructure of the country, did background investigation on this guy. He was alleging that he went to Batala at the time he spoke about when he was in White Plains. The other girl in question who also spoke on the radio on I think it was Spoon Network, and not Spoon Network, Cool FM, who also spoke when they asked her to come forward to help with the investigation. Where were you? Where did they take you? You remembered and stuff. She said she was seeing her message, so they were calling her chicken and all of these.
Oh my God, we lost David there. He's just went off. We hope that he can rejoin us. Okay, I see he's coming back in.
These are diabolical lies. There is no evidence from any of the allegations that Liberia is insecure. When people come to this country, then they begin to realize that most of the information out there about the insecurity of Liberia are incorrect. So Liberia is safe, Liberia is secure, and I heard Nathan talk about tangible security. What could be more tangible a security than for the government to be able to help to provide security for another country? It means then that we have sufficient security capacity, which is why we are helping to provide security for other people, like our peacekeepers going to Mali, they're contributing to peacekeeping in Sudan and other places in the world. So it tells you that Liberia has no existential threat. Liberia has no major national security threat for which we should be worried as a state. So my message to everyone that's listening to us: Liberia is secure from the border to the port, the airport. You are free to walk about the street and you will not get missing. The information out
All right,
there.
David. Let's just hold you. Let's just hold you there. I know you will want to press that, like Neto said. That's why you are paid to do that. See, Michael, just smile. Michael, you have any contrary views to some of these things that Assistant Minister Colette is clarifying?
Yeah, I mean, I had to laugh. You know, I'm speaking to you right now from Minnesota. There are places in Minneapolis that I do not go after dark if I don't have to. It's a reality. For the assistant minister to come here and say that Liberia is completely secure, there is no insecurity in Liberia, when all of us here, every single one on the platform knows somebody in Liberia who did not check their phone. You know, everybody here know somewhere in Liberia where the Zogone air that you cannot travel at night. When it's getting dark, people are finding their way home. You know, there's armed robbery going on in certain part of the outskirts of the capital. Those things are a reality. We're not asking the government to play magic. No. You know, we're not asking that. We're not asking you to put form a platform of perfection. But all we are saying is we want to see you work at it. Give us a plan and let's see that plan in action. So if the plan is to increase security, increase visual security, increase patrols, you know, increase logistics, more vehicles, more motorbikes, you know, have police on motorbikes, you know, more zonal stations, breaking down of zonal stations in areas, you know, so that the people can see the visual of security. All those things, if that's your plan, tell us and let us see it happen. But we are not, no, you know, the minister should not feel pressured to present, you know, this picture of, you know, Liberia is this la la land and everything is secure. No, it is not. I was in Liberia last April, you know, and driving, the driver will always remind me, pull your window up. Don't put your hand outside the door. They'll pull jack your phone, they'll jack your watch, they'll, you know. Oh, we can't go so and so area after dark. Those are realities. You know, we just want to see what the government is going to do about it, and we want to see those things in action. You know, so, you know, I mean, I understand the minister is hard pressed, but come on now, you know.
Okay, so thank you very much. David and Michael, let's look at this point made by President Weah, that the latest report from the IMF speaks high of his government, is very positive. He talked about inflation rate has reduced, and the issue with his IMF lauding his government for fighting the great corruption in Liberia. Let's start with you, David.
No, since Michael is
Okay.
Michael is still let Michael go.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, we've seen this before. The IMF, they come up with these numbers, and we all get excited. 3%, 7%, 5%, and we look forward to it. But then in the end, we see issues. We see there's a lack of the impact of those numbers on the lives of everybody. Right now the news I got yesterday, they say rest shortage. And so people are panicking. The price of rice is going up because and the thing about it is that once these kind of news get out, the people panic, and then they start buying up all the rice on the market. And with the increase in demand, there will be an increase in price. So now we're seeing the price of rice going up because of that. And so for me, what I'm really looking for is the impact. Don't tell me things are looking good. Let me feel it. Let me be able to go out there and get a job. Let me be able to go out there and get an increase in my if I'm working, let my boss come and say, look, things are looking so good, I will give you a raise. Let me see the price in basic commodities fall. Those are the things that we look for, not just the IMF saying something to us. If I'm hungry and you telling me I'm not hungry, guess what? I'm hungry. And until I can get something to eat, it doesn't change the fact that I'm hungry. You can tell me whole day that I'm not hungry, but I'm hungry. So I'm really interested in hearing what the minister has to say about how do these numbers, translate to the everyday, the prices and the livelihood of people in Liberia every day.
All right, Michael, right there. Let's see whether we can hear from you, David. You heard him. He's looking at the realities on the grounds, and I know you in Monrovia. Since this issue of rice, shortage, news broke out, have you been able to go around and see what's going on? That's another thing we will think that you can touch on, David. Kula, you there? It seems that we've lost the minister, Michael. But I think like you put it, the issue of the realities on the ground should speak to what is being said. But on the overall, that these reports don't just come up like that. These people have their own people on the grounds that do this investigation and compile these numbers and making these reports, out to the public. And now the president has taken onto it. It's a plus for him speaking about it on the biggest stage. Don't you think that due diligence was done so that the facts are reported to the Liberian people and to the world by the international partners?
And you see that is the confusing thing, because we would like to believe that the IMF is doing the due diligence, and that they in fact are doing the necessary things to come up with these numbers. But the question we keep asking ourselves is, why aren't the Liberian people feeling it? So what is the disconnect? Are they doing what they're supposed to do, and is something the government are doing? Or what is the issue? I really wish that somebody would address that for us, so then we could fully understand. So, oh, okay, maybe the IMF is seeing this, but maybe because of ABC. So, like 2 years ago, the IMF came up with numbers and said that they 3 years ago said that the economy was going to grow by between 7 to 10%. Everybody was excited. COVID happened. That was an explanation. We all understood that. So the numbers had to change. Okay. But moving past COVID, we continue to question, like, okay, so what is the issue? Why is the IMF saying that the economy will grow by 7%? 7%. But then rice, is going from $17 to $22. Okay, so what is the disconnect? Unemployment remains super high. The foreign direct investment remains super low. So what is the issue? Why is the disconnect? It's what we're really wondering. We want those numbers. Those are the numbers we're looking for. We want Liberia to grow double digits. Liberia is so low, it has the space to grow double digits simultaneously. But it's not happening. We're not feeling it. All of us here, everybody on this platform, we support people back home. You know, these few days we were paying school fee. We saw the prices of school fee, and then we hear the number of children that are out of school because they cannot pay school fees. So then the question is, okay, so where is this growth? What is the IMF talking about? Why are we not feeling this? Why is the Liberian people seem to be going in a different direction from what the IMF is saying? And we're hoping that the government can come out and give this explanation to us so that we can start to grasp what they are saying. That's all we're asking for. We're not, like I said before, we're not asking for magic, but we just want to understand what's going on.
Yeah, David, you left us briefly, and now you're back. And I think you listened to Micah when you came back on. The point here is that all of these numbers are coming up, but why is it that the impact is not being felt by those that are on the grounds? You want to talk about that?
Okay, basically, let me address them, one by one. The numbers coming from the IMF are basically realistic figures. They are realistic numbers. The government is working along with the IMF partners here in Liberia, the World Bank partners here in Liberia, in terms of implementing fiscal and monetary regime policies. Now, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, the MCC, rated Liberia as being on path in line with fiscal transparency. How they interpret fiscal transparency is that there were no undocumented spendings, there were less wasteful spendings, and there was capital investment within the economy. Now, the way growth is measured by the standards of the IMF are in three folds. Number one, the impact on living, income, capital investment, fiscal and monetary regime management. Those are the three key areas that the IMF focuses. Now, the IMF is reporting that growth is going to go up because of the activities that are taking place within the mining sector. In 2013, our basic export, and you know them, Saros, are rubber, iron ore, gold, and timber. These exports were nosedive on the international market because of market factors. In 2017, going towards the elections, it was down. In 2018, it was also down, which is why we had challenges with inflation. The inflation's number between 2018 to 2019 was around 23 to 31, a whopping 23 to 31%. Today, inflation is around 7.2%, 6.7%, thereabout. The numbers are different with the IMF and the World Bank. So what that tells you is that not only is the government focusing on creating microeconomic stability, the government is also focusing on the monetary regime of the country, which is responsible for inflation in the country. What you notice, what really happened during that time was that people were talking about foreign direct investment. Most of the areas we have concentration of foreign direct investment are within the extractive industry. The ArcelorMittal area, the ArcelorMittal mining concession, the China Union mining concession, China Union just came back. The Orios mining, which is now NTG Gold, and all the other mines. Those areas are the areas that the numbers that the IMF is basically talking about, that the numbers are going to come from. The reason why our GDP is going up is because we have cut down on wasteful spending. We are putting the money in the right areas. So the question that most of the people are asking is that what are the tangibles? Someone say they're buying rice. Rice is being sold now in Liberia for $15. The people, for instance, India, which is a major rice producing country, has cut down export of rice to the world by almost 60% because they have their own challenges. Thailand and other countries, we are also very huge rice producing country, have cut down export of rice. China is one that the COVID had major impact on, because these factors are market related factors. What happens in Thailand? what happens in China, what happens in India is definitely going to affect the price here. If there's a scarcity, demand, the cost of the commodity is going to go up because demand will be high and people will not be able to have access to it. We are not producing rice as a country. Now, this government, President Weah government, has been working with the Emirati government. He was in the United Arab Emirates recently. That was in June. He had meetings with authorities of the UAE to bring a real-time technology here that we are going to produce our own rice and reduce the annual 230 million importation of rice to the country. That program is going to create jobs. That program is going to bring foreign direct investment to the country, and our families will be able to feed themselves at lower cost. We are concentrating on a few counties. We are concentrating on Lofa, on Nema, on Bong, on Grand Jide, Bapolu, and Grand Cape Mount. These counties will have not just the rice plant or the rice program in their counties. We are also going to see real-time job creation. That will increase circular flow. That will increase purchasing power. When people have money, they are working for money and that. Now, when it comes to people talking about paying fees, I can say for a fact that there is no president that has ever contributed to education like the way President Weah has done. President Weah policy on education, in fact, that was one of the only campaign messages he had during the elections, that when he wins the election, he's going to make education affordable and free. Has President Weah fulfilled that commitment to the Liberian people? I will tell you a resounding yes. The first 100 days of the president's in office, the president announced to the world and to the Liberian people that the state-run University of Liberia and all other public colleges and universities were free to attend. The government is underwriting the cost of tuition fee at all of those universities.
Oh wow, we keep losing Minister David Colette. I'm sure that
He will lose audio
you know that
whenever-
issue.
Not that
So
whenever anybody call him on his cell phone.
maybe he's using his Propo phone when he gets the call. The Propo phone.
A 5G in Liberia, man.
5G. He's back. He's back. David, just before you left us, I mean, we just want you to tell it. I mean, make it to be in a nutshell. Let's wrap it up. We gotta go. So.
I'm basically saying that people are talking about the impact of the numbers coming from the IMF. I'm saying that the market factors are responsible for those numbers that are coming from the IMF, because we are basically an 85.6% input country. We are importing most of what we consume, so it means that the pressure is going to be on the money. But the government has been able to do a lot, from taking inflation from between 31% to 23% down to 7.6% or 6.7% there, about the different numbers from different platforms, the IMF, the World Bank, and the African Development Bank. Those numbers are different. So I'm basically saying we are not producing most of what we consume. So that's the challenges we are facing. How the government is trying to address that, we are working with bilateral partners, multinational corporations, to ensure that the availability of our needed consumable like rice and other staple are on the market.
Okay, let's look at this issue President Weah spoke about, women empowerment, in his speech, and fighting corruption that IMF lauded his government for. What can you say about that in a nutshell?
David, you go.
Hello?
Let's hear you, David.
Getting me?
Very well.
Women empowerment. Initially, most of the conversation around women empowerment were basically about they should give women the right to participate in elections. This government was able to sign the first legislation that gave women 30% right in representation in political processes in elections. This government signed the first law to give women the right. Secondly, all of the program from the Ministry of Gender, support to women, support to girls, support to adolescents is ongoing, and The world has acknowledged that. During the COVID time, women, single mothers were having alert on their phone. They were getting support, financial support directly to their phone and to their phones to take care of their family. Women empowerment is well on course, both in social development and in politics. The government put aside $3 million in 2019 to give support to middle enterprise businesses, small to medium enterprise businesses, so that these people who are the drivers of the economy can continue to do business, because most of them were impacted by the COVID. The Ministry of Commerce and the Ministry of Gender are working together to make sure that this money reach those women. It's going to reach to them so that they are able to do their business. Some people want to do business, some people are involved with different entrepreneurial, some people are doing soap making, some people are doing farming, some people are doing tailoring, and all of that. The government is providing support in those areas.
All right, Michael, you listened to David very well. I know you want to chime in on that as well.
Yeah. So this is a government that has as its vice president a female, and that's a great move by this government. However, we continue to hear the impact of gender violence. We continue to hear the impact of rape of young girls. And it's a great concern. It's a great concern to every Liberian. Um, we're hopeful that this government can actually take even more steps than what it has taken. Like I said, it's one thing to come up and say, "Oh, I'm creating a special court, I'm creating a special committee," but it's another thing for us to see accused rapists go to court, get convicted, and taken to prison. That is the impact. That is what is going to reduce rape in Liberia. When perpetrators of the crime can see that indeed, that if you do this, you will end up in prison. And prison in Liberia and somewhere nobody wants to go. But this is what we're really looking forward to. When it comes to, the minister talk about, the small business micro loan to women. What are the statistics? Don't just tell me, say you set aside 3 million 2 years ago to affect how many women were affected. How many women were able to increase their livelihood based on this. How many women were not affected. What is the plan to affect those, to reach out to those women who were not affected, to see how we can redo this plan again. What were the pitfalls? What did we miss? What are we going to do to correct those things? Is this a program that we're going to see again? Those are information that the people need. It's telling me that, we send money for this, we send money for that. That's only one piece of it. But what did that money do? How did it affect the people? Have you seen what do you call a conglomerate of women making soap? No, we haven't seen it. So we are not seeing, and that even from the beginning of my presentation here, I said the president is saying a lot, but we are not seeing it. IMF is saying a lot, but we are not feeling it. And that's what we look forward to this government to do, to give us the tangibles. Don't just say it. Show it to us. Give us some numbers that we too can go and verify and say, yes, indeed, this government has done this. It has taken 300 women out of poverty, giving them a livelihood, and these are the things that they are doing. And so that's what we'll continue to look for this government.
Yeah, we're gonna be wrapping it up very soon. But I mean, since you still got the floor, Michael, is there any other thing, a topic that you expected President Weah to touch on within this speech that you did not get to hear about? Is there anything you feel that he should have said or touched on? I mean, that he did not.
Well, maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear the president talk about corruption, sanctions, and what his government intends to do concerning those things. I think the whole sanction corruption thing is the big boogeyman in the room, especially when 3 of his principal lieutenants have been sanctioned by the US. I expected the president to give us an update. You remember a month ago when these people were sanctioned, the president said that there was going to be an investigation. We haven't heard anything about the investigation since then. It's been over 30 days. Other people now are saying, they have like ill. They can just talk. After a while, everything gets sly and nothing comes out of it. And so that encourages other people to do what? To be corrupt. Because they know that when I steal and I get my own amount, nothing will come out of it. So that was one of the things I was really hoping the president was going to touch base on his actions towards corruption. Even if he didn't mention the sanction, but just to talk in detail about, not just mention, oh, my government is committed to fighting corruption. In 5 years, almost 5 years, we have not seen anybody go to jail for corruption. And we all know Liberia is corrupt. We all know Liberia get corrupt people. Liberia, they're not injured and walking around. So why, after almost 5 years, now one person has been brought to book on corruption? And I felt that's why I really hoping the president was going to beat down on a little bit, but I didn't hear that.
Yeah, you want to come in there, Tom?
Yes, so that was one of the issues you made mention of, because in his speech it was just like in passing where he spoke about national wealth, like we talk about corruption and other stuff, was not really spoken about the issue of agriculture. I did not hear anything on agriculture, and the issue with education, I did not hear anything. Apparently, maybe because of the theme of the conference. As you know, the UN, the conference is honor a theme, and the theme for that conference, maybe looking at the theme for the conference, a watershed movement, transformative solution to interlocking challenges, is both appropriate and meaningful. So looking at that theme, which is focusing on challenges
the country might be facing,
so the issue is looking at what? Food insecurity, gender inequality, poverty reduction, environmental challenges, right? Devastating effects on climate change and environmental challenges, COVID-19 pandemic. So these are some of the
probably he just still his address around those issues, but Michael, on the other hand, feel that this was something that should have been addressed.
Yes, absolutely. I felt like the president should have addressed that. I mean, it's too hot. It's too hot on the country's mind when it comes to corruption. And I really felt the president should have taken this opportunity, to speak to the world and say, and basically say, look, Liberia is not a corrupt nation. My government is not a corrupt government, and these are the steps that we have taken, and these are the results of those steps, and these are the even more stringent steps we are going to take to bring corruption under control. When you are looking at the UN, and these are the people that bring the money to Liberia, and their concern is the money is donor money. So we want to make sure when that money comes that that it is free from corruption. And so you need to make sure that you allay the fears of those people, who might be looking at you and thinking, say, my man, the last time you were here, 2 other people that brought you, they're on sanction list. So tell us something. And I think the president missed an opportunity to speak to the world concerning that. Even when it comes to climate change, I was hoping that the president would have laid a better plan. We have the largest rainforest in West Africa right now. If you know what I mean, and we need to protect that rainforest. So as a country that depends on logging, where's the balance? How do we continue to produce logs for the world, but at the same time protect our forests? And I thought maybe the president could have touched base on that too, and he didn't. But like I said, there was a time limit to it, so maybe he'll consume more time. So he had to pick his moments. But we're hoping that even on his return to Liberia, that even what wasn't spoken, that the president will still take action towards, because speaking at the UN is not a minute, amount of his work. He actually has to come back and put things to action. So we're looking forward to this last year of the president being one of action, and that we can really see true change in Liberia.
And Minister Colette, I know you listened to Michael. You think it was a missed opportunity for President Weah to touch on the hottest topic on the lips of Liberians at home and abroad, corruption? You think he was to speak about his 3 sanctioned officials and giving the word, reassurance that he's going to be fighting these things in his government if they come?
The president has already, thank you, Cyrus. The president has already demonstrated sufficient muscles to the fight against corruption. You may recall in 2018, there were some allegations of corruption at the National Housing Authority. What did you see there? People were tried. People went to court. That's how you fight corruption. You also remember when there were allegations of corruption at the Port of Buchanan. What happened? The corporate allegedly fled, left Liberia. He could not face justice. When the U.S. Treasury Department came up with financial sanctions against 3 Liberian officials, senior officials, what happened? They resigned the government and they are waiting to face prosecution. After the investigation, they were answered to questions. And these Liberians have the right to say, I didn't do this. And for instance, one of the persons accused who was placed on sanction, they said there were perception issue about the allegations, and there are perception issues about allegations of corruption with appointed officials. For instance, people have this general perception in Liberia that once you are appointed by the president, then you are involved with corruption automatically. For instance, many people do not think that people can work and save money to be able to build a house. You build a comfortable house, and people see your comfortable house, people take the picture. I remember one time someone posted something on Facebook about one of our very important doctors in the country. He is a head of, I don't want to call his name because this topic is related to corruption. Someone accused him of being corrupt. This man is a lead, one of the key surgeons for the American Institute of Surgeon Professionals. This man has been working for more than 19 years. More than 20 years, in fact, because he came to Liberia to work in 2001. So it's been 21 years this man has been working. Someone took this man's house picture and put it on Facebook that the man just came to government. This man has been at his workplace, GFK, for 5 years, for heaven's sake.
But David, don't you think that this is happening because most, if not all, government officials appointed are not declaring assets? So as a result of that, when somebody just see your house built overnight, probably you have money in your account before you got into government, like you put it with this quote-unquote surgeon. The only thing that's why causing the public outcry when people have been appointed, and when you get to look, they are owning properties.
Every public official has to declare their assets before they are confirmed by the Liberian Senate. When you are appointed by the president, you go to the LACC and you declare your asset. That's what the law says. The law did not say you should print your asset and put it on Facebook so that everybody can see it. If people want to know whether people declare their asset or not, they should go to the LACC. The LACC has the record of people who have declared their assets. So these people have declared their asset, but because people want to just malign people's character and do not want to follow the process of doing due diligence to the information they receive, they basically peddle lies that people are not declaring their asset. Now, I also listened to Nathan. Nathan talked about food security. The president did talk about agriculture. Climate change is tied to agriculture. The challenges that the world is facing today with climate change is basically tied to food security. What our government is doing to tackle food security is to ensure that the 64% threshold that we have reached as a country in terms of carbon emission, the protection of our environment, is sustained so that we can have any challenges with food security. Yes, Michael is right that we control 43% of the total sub-Sahara rainforest, but we do not we are working to ensure that that zone, that 43% is protected, is guarded by international laws, is able to support both the government and support the carbon emission program across the world. So we are conforming to that. We are supporting that process. Our president went to the UN and reaffirmed basically to the world that his government is supporting the climate change program. He also talked about the environment. The EPA.
And I tell you, we lost David there again. He done that, or maybe somebody called him pro perform again. But guys, we have to wrap it up. It is almost an hour we've been on here after the president's statement. So we will take final words from you guys as we wrap it up. Let's start up with you, David, since in fact you were already in flight, even though your pro perform keeps receiving calls and throwing you off.
Thank you, Cyrus. It's a privilege and it is my singular honor to join all of you on this program. And to sum it up, I think the president's message at the United Nations General Assembly was a thrilling one. It touched all the basic issues pertaining global affairs. The president's message touched women empowerment. It touched our at-risk youth. It touched climate change and food security. It touched education. It touched regional security. It touched the economy, basically about the growth in the economy and the confidence of the international community, including the World Bank, the IMF, the African Development Bank, all of them, including the MCC, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, have all hailed this government for financial transparency, for fiscal discipline, for monitoring. As a matter of fact, we tapped West Africa in terms of monitoring, the monitoring zone of the entire region. We came number one because of some of the measures we put into place in cutting down wasteful spending. In 2013, the total envelope on recurring expenditure, gasoline, new decks, fuel oil, trash car, was around $23 million. When we came into office, looking at the fiscal space and looking at our fiscal envelope, and we want to do stuff that will impact the lives of the people, this government reduced the recurring cost from 23 million to 8 million in 2021-2022 national budget. Now, that tells you that the government is serious about making more investment, capital investment, doing more roads, paying attention to schools construction, building quarters for teachers, making sure that health workers get on the payroll, making sure that our students in high school do not worry about WAS and WAEC fees, making sure that our doctors salary is increased, making sure that people that we met on the payroll who were qualified, who had the professional competence, but were being denied their fair share of enumeration. Those people were given fair share of their enumeration. If you got a bachelor's degree, there's a standard for you. If you have a master's degree, there's a standard for you. And all of these were put into place during the harmonization process. And we appreciate our international partners for the support, the hand of support they continue to give this government. This government is committed to democratic governance, the rule of law, the fight against corruption, and the protection of our environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David Collet, Assistant Minister there at the Ministry of Information, Culture, Affairs and Tourism. He joined us from Monrovia, his office in Monrovia, and on Capitol Hill precisely. And Michael, let's hear you out as we wrap it up. What's your final words as we wrap it up on this special broadcast?
Yes, it was great. It was great that the assistant minister could join us. You can't deny he's earning his pay. He's earning his pay. He's speaking on behalf of the government. But just the president's speech, um, what we were hoping or expecting was that just the flow of the speech. The first thing is that we're expecting a normal introduction. We're hoping the president will give us a review of last year, the things he spoke about last year, and give us an update on those things, and then tell us about what he's hopeful on doing into the next year. But we didn't see it that way. The president touched, as you heard Assistant Minister talk about, the president touched on this and touched on that and touched on the other. But what we were really hoping for, the meat and potatoes of what we were hoping for, we did not get. We didn't get any substance the at-risk youth in our communities. What is the plan? And what will be the effect of this plan? We didn't get that. We didn't get anything really when it comes to the meat and potatoes on corruption, which is a hot topic in Liberia, and the sanctions of key officials. Just what the government plan were moving forward. The assistant minister talked, about a couple of instances where people were investigated. If you notice, he didn't tell you anybody went to jail. Because nobody went to jail, because of those things. Yeah, there were investigations, and there were a couple of trials that started, and then the government fell flat on its feet, and they had to abandon the trial, and those charges were dropped. We haven't seen any since then. We do not have a solicitor general as of now. And why? Because alleged corruption. So those are the things that we missed. The president talked about the IMF and a glowing record of the IMF, but the people in Liberia today, are struggling to get their meal for the day, to feed their families for the day. And we're hoping the president was going to give us a little bit more meat on that, and he didn't. And then finally, the elections. The elections they're coming, whether we want it or not. We looked at the timeline. It doesn't look realistic. We're still waiting for census. Census determine districts. So, if the population has grown, there might be even new districts created after the census. We haven't talked about that. The money for elections still hasn't been secured. Magistrates being replaced. And like I say, everybody is fearful for the violence that is to come up. We really hope for the president was going to give some reassurance to the world and to Liberians on that timeline. But we did hear a promise that it will be peaceful. We are hopeful for that. Liberia's peace has been a very hard-fought peace. It is the responsibility of every single Liberian, both at home and abroad, to maintain that peace, to protect that peace at all cost. And we're hoping the president will lead the way, to lead that effort, and we will definitely support him in enforcing that peace come election time. Besides that, thank you guys so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the platform. Thank you for the network. We look forward to continue to inform our people and interact with our people all around the world, and bringing Liberia to them everywhere. Thank you so much, you guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Michael Pathmoon right there. You heard him. Earlier on, you heard Assistant Minister David Colette. So later you want to run through some of the messages, the comments on our page, and do some due diligence to people who've been following. I don't know whether you can pick up a few of them just before we wrap it up.
Let's listen to what Bob Jalawa said. Food security in Liberia is apparent by itself. The minister talking nonsense here. He also said that another message from Curtis Dolly. Unfortunately, the we are speech does not represent the realities on the ground. He missed the word. The fact and no medications at various major public hospitals in the country. Liberians are on a daily basis denied from having access to medical treatments. People are living in fear due to insecurity and corruption has taken over the country. Many current government officials who could not afford to pay for one-bedroom apartment before 2017 are wealthy people today. The U.S. government has begun putting sanctions on them. So another person, Keith Black, Liberia with their for nothing, backdoor, big mouth. So another comment here from Nate Bosco, you guys are not serious. So there are a whole lot of comments.
A lot of comments. So I mean, you can just log on to the show.
Mr. President, thanks for delivering a powerful speech. So there are a lot of them here to keep coming.
So on this note, we wrap it up on this special presentation, especially after President Weah's address to the 77th United Nations General Assembly there in New York. You saw the posture on the face of the president. I don't know. We don't have time to display some of those photos that came from the sitting, during the week. There was a lot of scenes, man. The seriousness. He was so serious. You see his officials, the posture on their faces, sitting by him. The foreign minister, Master Kimia. Everybody's just very serious.
Yes, I mean it's a program to analyze, right? Rationalize different group of people. So even while there, you're listening and planning on what's the next activities. There are a whole lot of things coming to the UN General Assembly, not just sitting there. You got other things you got to be pondering about, listening very well, analyzing the speech and how best you can make connection and what you can learn from other speakers. So that's how people learn. People go to this program to learn. So you saw information minister, you saw maritime, you saw commerce, you saw gender, you saw Jefferson Kochi, Monrovia City Minister, and a couple of people were all part of the delegation.
And there is this picture. I think we can display this one to see what the public. This picture with, as a matter of fact, with the structure, the Liberian delegation sat right before the U.S. delegation, right behind our president and his officials. You could see the United Nations, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, former ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, who was ambassador to Liberia. You could see former Senator John Kerry, all of them there. Let's see whether we can just fade this picture. Senator Kerry there in a handshake with President Weah. So these are pictures that when you look at them, you look at the posture, you see you get to think that after this connections. Like you were putting it on the issue of connections, the backdoor, diplomacy, and what can people push for Liberia. Do you think President Weah at this General Assembly could pull some strings that Liberians might not be thinking about?
As you know, Washington is all about lobbying power. How can you hire a lobby firm, right, to push buttons? So we hope that, I know on the Ellen Johnson study time, they had a lobbyists who were in Washington and New York and the pushing buttons. So we have signed a contract before, but I'm not too educated on that contract. But I know they have a lobby firm who is knocking doors. So he's visiting the U.S. He will be meeting other dignitaries. And
but don't you think that he could be the chief lobbyist on behalf of Liberia? No, I mean, at these conferences, at these talks, that's where you can meet world leaders face to face. There is no third party in there. There's another picture. This one with
decisions, right?
Decisions are not made. But whether I mean, I can make the next visit to the U.S. to meet other President Biden. I know he's expected back here in December on an invitation from President Joe Biden. But these are areas where you get to see these people. You saw him and Linda Thomas-Greenfield. Let me just pull this one out. Him and Linda Thomas-Greenfield in that photo. If you look at this photo, it speaks a lot.
I mean, apart from that photo, the U.S. know the obligation to Liberia. The U.S. know that Liberia is their charge, right? They have the ambassador there. So it all depends how, apart from just the government, there are other sectors, UNFPA, right? UNHCR. these are the challenges in my country, right? We need this, we need that. How can we empower our security apparatus? But everything you say, oh, we are making gains. I say, okay, he said we are making gains. There are other people who are analyzing, who are listening to that. How best can they help? So we hope that government will do what it can do.
If you're there, I would like to say thanks for being there. Thanks for.
Let me just summarize, President. We are the team for the conference. Was held focusing on food insecurity, gender equity, talking about the environmental concern, poverty reduction, the effects of climate change, like I said, the COVID-19 pandemic. And President, we have spoken about this issue. He said his government is making gains. He started out with the war in Ukraine and how COVID turned everything around, but there are positive impact. He said the issue of the youthful population, government is supporting youth empowerment. President Weah said as feminist in chief, his government is also empowering women. He made mention of the EU project in that thing, an ECOWAS funding project, about 50 million. He told the world that yes, my government is making some gains on the issue of the environment. He says 64% reduction in carbon emissions. That's something he said because the focus of that conference is also on climate change. So he said his government is doing that, and they are reviving, or they have new legislation that to help improve this stuff like that. On the issue of COVID, he said yes, we are making gains. People are being treated on the issue of the IMF, rather, on the issue of fighting corruption. He made mention of the IMF.
Scoring good points at the IMF.
Yeah, like I said, he said that was very positive from the IMF. He said, that I quote him, I'm pleased to report that IMF latest report or appraisal of the ongoing programs it has with Liberia is very positive. So that was one thing he said. And on the issue of democracy, he said yes, his institution is building up a vibrant, strengthening democratic institution, and he will ensure that these institutions are upheld. On the issue with the elections, that's a major thing. He said the forthcoming election is very crucial, in cementing our democracy. So he says his government is going to do that to make sure that whoever wins, that's the decision of the Liberian people, will be followed by. So he said another issue, President Weah spoke about is the 2030 agenda, reaching that agenda, poverty reduction, empowering people. So these are things President Weah touched about in his, I don't know how many minutes, I will check the minutes.
We check the minutes because we're so getting into, but he did not use that platform to talk about the U.S. action on his officials that resigned. He didn't talk anything about that. I think he just meant to leave a sleeping door lie. You don't want to come to the biggest stage, and talk about some of these things. I'm sure that's why probably those who advise him, his advisors, do not touch on that. just speak or stick to what the conference, I mean the General Assembly team is all about. So he just
because the equal distribution of wealth. I was like,
it's really happening. So, you know, so those were things, folks. If you're there, we'd like to say thanks for following us. We will be back here tomorrow, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, for another edition of Diaspora Talk. But as you know, whenever the president hits the General Assembly grounds, there are Liberians who troop in, you know, whether in their numbers from around the country, around the U.S. That also happened today. There were some Liberians who went to New York to give support to the president. We were looking because in past there were other groups who went there to, you know, against, you know, his leadership, his style, and all of that. Yeah. But today we tried to look as much as we could to see whether there were groups for and against. But we saw people actually in support of President Weah. Some of them wearing his T-shirts, you know, T-shirts with his pictures on them, you know, showing to the world that we keep, yeah. So we see their faces. So we will see. So we will wrap it up playing this video of Liberians showing up to support their president as he spoke at the United Nations General Assembly. Until tomorrow, when we catch you on your screens, KMTV will be back tomorrow. Diaspora Talk. I'm Cyrus McGee, my colleagues did to charge. We've been doing it together. Thanks to Michael Padmo and Minister David Colette for joining us in, you know, sharing the platform this afternoon. Until then, have yourself a wonderful time. Let's listen to these brothers and sisters from Liberia who went to support their president.
When the issues of Liberia hit the news,
what is it that we, the Liberian people, want?
The Liberian communities in the diasporas are not left out. That's why Diaspora Talk is back on your screens on KMTV.
In fact, the United Party is not cohesive.
Be it social, political, economic, and other issues affecting Liberia and the diaspora Liberian communities.
I did not expect to even make it to Hollywood.
Join Cyrus McGee and Nathan Charles every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, live on KMTV, Facebook, and YouTube.
I want to be arrested in the midst of my people.
As they discuss the issues, blend the voices from Liberia and the diaspora Liberian communities,
and speak the truth on what is happening.
For sponsorship, call cell numbers 612-806-5896, 816-433-3979, or better still, email us at usakmtv@gmail.com. Diaspora Talk. Don't miss out.